All right, welcome to Michael's record collection. I'm very honored to have with me from the band Sweet, Andy Scott. Thanks for being with me.
Oh, it's lovely to be, to be alive, basically, after the year we've all had. And I'm quite happy in my own skin, and I'm quite happy with my own company. So I'm not the one in my house who's having problems. It's my other half. She's climbing the bleeding walls, mate.
Uh,
She needs to get out and about and do things.
I can relate. I think the only thing that I really was missing was being able to sit down in a nice restaurant and go to see a concert. I think that was about it.
Yeah, well, the concert thing, ditto, but we would be on the stage, wouldn't we? So,
Yeah. So I want to talk to you today about Isolation Boulevard, a new album that's just come out. It has 12 songs on it, and it was recorded during the lockdown of September and October of 2020. Um, I guess my first question is why? Why release Isolation Boulevard, which is a re-recording of some of the band's well-known tracks throughout the years?
um, we owe Sony an album of new material, and it's been kicked down the road a couple of times because of work commitments and the fact that Sony in Germany moved a lot of what they did from Munich to Berlin, and it's one of those situations that, however much I would like to deliver a new album during the pandemic, I don't think is the right time to be doing that. However, the band wanted to do something, and what better than the songs that we perform live, the majority of the set? We might as well
Hmm.
attack that. Plus, also, we have a new singer who's only been in the band a couple of years. He's been depping for the lead singer who eventually left for about 7 or 8 years. So it's not as if he's new to the fans or the band or anything. But to get his vocals on all of those classic tracks and do a slight reworking at the same time. We did a re-record quite a few years ago where they sound like the original recordings, 25 years ago.
Hmm.
And we fooled a lot of people with that particular set of re-records, but this, we wanted to do something slightly different. And the easy way, because there was a gap in the summer last year between lockdowns, where I was able to get some of the guys down to my studio one at a time. The only thing that we've, and it's not faking, the only thing that we've done on a couple of the tracks is we found some fantastic outtake drum tracks that we have edited, and you'd never know. You'd think that we'd all been in the studio together. But everything that you hear was put together in a very, very quick, short space of time, and it seems the fans love it. So it wasn't a bad choice, was it, in the end?
No, not at all. Let's talk about the current band a little bit. It's yourself, Steve Priest, Mick Tucker, and Billy Connolly. Of course, no longer with us. You mentioned new singer Paul Manzi. People that have followed progressive rock would know Paul's work with the band Arena. He worked with Clive Nolan and those folks in Arena for surprising. I was surprised to find out that he'd been with them 10 years. It just seemed like he just is the new guy, but he was with Arena. Lee Small is on bass and Bruce Bisland on drums. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Yes, you are. And it would have been fantastic. And I don't really want to correct you because to have Billy Connolly in the suite would have been hilarious and fantastic. But the guy's name is Brian Connolly,
Sorry,
and
sorry. Yeah,
that's okay.
yeah.
And Brian was equally as hilarious and fantastic. But,
Yeah,
yeah, Paul.
Freudian slip. I know both. I know
Yeah,
both
yeah.
gentlemen's work very well.
Yeah, and the thing is, I got to know Billy because we were on the same label in the late '70s when he was having his hits, and we'd shifted labels when we released "Love Is Like Oxygen," and it was in the days when Billy used to enjoy a drink, and there were many an afternoon where I went round to the record company, and the guy who used to look after us said, "I think it's time to go across the road to the pub," and we'd still be there at closing time sometimes. So it was great. Right, to answer, the Bruce Bisland has been with me for nearly 30 years. Now that is a lifetime in itself.
Mm-hmm.
He is so right for the band. I'm not sure if he ever decides that that's it, Andy, I can't do it anymore. I've got some youngsters hanging around in the wings, but I have to tell you, I'm not sure how it looks when you've got really young guys playing alongside the old guys like myself. I really don't know how that works, But Paul, yes, when we first when we needed a singer about almost 20 years ago, Paul was quite young then, and he came along because somebody had highly recommended him. I think it was Rick Wakeman, because he'd been working with his son, Oliver Wakeman, and he sent me some stuff. And when we started to do some backing vocals together, we realized how much louder we sang than him. And the only reason he didn't really get the gig at that time was he was a bit young, and he was a great singer, but the guy who had been in the heavy rock band Praying Mantis was available, and it was just a matter of slotting him in, but he didn't last. So maybe we should have got Paul in back then, and we'd have had 20 years with him instead of Arena having some of it,
Yeah.
But and Lee Small is also a lead vocalist as well. He's been doing some work with our keyboard player who comes on the road with the band, Steve Mann, in a band called Lionheart.
Mm-hmm.
They're a late 70s, early 80s band, and he's now the lead singer with Steve in that particular band. They've made a new album, but I don't know what the progress for that is. But a lot of these guys these days, you see, I've only ever been in Sweet since 1970. I don't have side bands apart from the band I had with Susie Quattro and Don Powell from Slade, called QSP. We did an album and a couple of tours. But you see, I joined the Sweet, and I'm shackled. That's my band. Whereas a lot of these guys, they seem to be in 2 or 3 different projects. As they, and I understand why, because the opportunity there to actually do what the Sweet did is not easy anymore. There is no route by doing some great gigs and releasing some records that have been hits does not guarantee you fame, fortune, and celebrity. There's a lot of bands out there that my son and my roadie that they tell me about, who have been #1 in the charts and have had albums that have been streamed and all that stuff, and I've never heard of them. It's not like it used to be. When people used to get #1s over here, they were front page news in the newspapers.
Yeah.
But I guess the internet killed all that.
Yeah, I think video killed the radio star, and then the internet killed the video star.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it went. It seems like the English music scene is so tight, so plugged in together, because it's funny, you mentioned Susie Quattro, and I had completely coincidentally been listening to her music both Friday and today at work, and it was only today that I found out that you had produced an album for her a few years back, and then you just brought up the fact that you had worked with her in a band. So it just seems like you guys are all very knowledgeable of one another over there.
Yeah, the Susie thing, I mean, I've known her almost since the beginning when she came over here, but really got to know her probably in the early 80s when Sweet were in hiatus, and I was more of a producer and a songwriter at that time. And then it took a few years doing some dates together in usually in places like Germany or Scandinavia, and her husband realized, because I sometimes I would get up on stage and jam with her, and her husband said, "You need to do something." And we worked out that well, she asked me, would I produce, and she hadn't made an album for quite a while, and even though I wasn't quite sure of the title, but I understand why she did it. It was called Back to the Drive. You know, in other words, Devilgate Drive, Back to the Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Chapman was the original songwriter, was in the executive producer chair, but I took her in the studio and did all the recordings and stuff, and it worked out really, really well. And from that, everybody started to say, "Well, we need a drummer," and we're away. We've got ourselves a little band here. And Don Powell from Slade was the obvious choice, you know, as a drummer, because he's exactly from the right era, the similar age, and similar mentality. So for me, it was just a very, very natural thing to do. And the way we started it was, I live near Peter Gabriel's studio in Wiltshire here in London. Mm-hmm. And I'd been using the studio, and the guys there are fantastic. They've helped me out with my studio at home here. And I said, we just need 3 days to just try something. In fact, we'd been in there for an afternoon to record a TV track that I was doing with Susie, and she liked it. And so I said, right, Don, when are you free? When are you free, Susie? And we went in there for 3 days, and we came out with 7 tracks. They're cover versions. That's what kickstarted the album. All those cover versions that we did, like Tobacco Road and Just Like a Woman, and I Walk on Gilded Splinters, and the Slow Down, the old Larry Williams track, you know. So it's all that kind of stuff that that we all grew up with. So we just wanted to get that out of our system, and if that worked, then Susie and I got together and we wrote another half a dozen songs, you know. So that's how it all came together.
That's great. I wanted to ask you what it means to you to be the lone surviving member of the classic era of the Sweet lineup. I mean, it's great that you're carrying on, and I wonder if it's do you feel like an obligation to carry on? Is it hard for you without the other 3 guys, knowing that they're gone now? You know, how is that for you?
Everybody probably thinks that it's, you know, there are some very weird people who go on the internet, and they obviously think, you know, oh, you're finally on your own. You know, you've been doing it on your own, you know, for a little while Steve, you know, was in LA. And the truth of the matter is, every time there's been an opportunity, especially with Steve in LA, I've said, we need to do something together. You know, there's only 2 of us left. And of course, he passed away last year. In fact, just about a year ago. Mm-hmm. And then you find out things that he'd probably been suffering. He hadn't been that well for quite a while. And whenever I spoke to him on the telephone, he let's put it this way, he's never been the happiest of souls, and he did not seem very happy in himself the last couple of times I spoke to him. Now, I don't know what causes things like that, but it makes me sad to realize that now I am the only one. I mean, the one that I got closest to after the original band was obviously Mick, the drummer, because we were in the Suite together in the 80s into the early 90s. And then his illness, he was diagnosed with, and I did not know, he was keeping it from me. He was having epileptic fits, you know, and I said to him, you can't do things like this. And once it happened at a gig, and he was taken to hospital and he couldn't do the show. But other times it's been in the middle of the night in his hotel. Now, you tell me, you can't have that. You need to have, you know, control or somebody to basically be with you, or an alert, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was devastating. Well, I mean, losing Brian in the very beginning was He was far too young, you know. I think he was 52. But then, you know, he was full on. The guy was full on. You know, an unstoppable force when you probably should have been thinking, do I need another drink? You know, maybe he was the oldest of us as well. So it kind of hit me hard because that was right at the time when we were talking about giving it another go, you know, with him. But he knew that somehow he had to try and get his voice back. You know, how that was going to work, I didn't know. And then, of course, 5 years later, we lost Mick. He almost to the day, he kept telling me, he said, well, with my leukemia, because his epilepsy and pancreatitis kind of triggers the leukemia gene sometimes. And I remember him saying to me, if I have this done, it gives me another 5 years. And I said, well, let's make good use of that. But he was never, drumming is physical. Yeah. It's not like you've got to stand there with a guitar or a bass or play a keyboard. Drumming is physical, and he was never going to get behind the kit and be the Mick Tucker that I knew. But he would come to some of the gigs, and the fans would love to see him. And then Steve moving to America in 81, 82, completely, and not coming back was another blow, because when Mick and I, after 2 or 3 years off the road, and I'm talking to Mick in such a way that you can't just sit here. He lost his wife tragically it was a complete misadventure accident. I think she'd taken a sleeping pill and then had a bath and didn't wake up. And he walked in, and there she is. And he was in a terrible state. And I used to go around to his house and sit with him. And if he needed a drink, we would drink. If he didn't, we would just chat. And in the end, I basically said, the way out of this is to do what you do best. And, you know, at least the fans got to see about, 10 years of us, doing something again, But Steve moving to America, at that time, I mean, I used to go over to New York and sit with him he was in a very small, Manhattan, small apartments, cost a fortune, and hardly any space. And then a baby daughter came along, and luckily his wife got a transfer to go out to LA, and they were able to live with some space in a house. But he was not interested in coming back on the road. And then about 10 years ago, he started to do some shows again with some LA musicians. It never quite sounded like the Sweet, because it's a very British thing. It's the only way I can describe it. There's a template. You have to follow it. You have to, and it seems, especially with the vocals, it's just the way it is. And but fine, he's an original member. I can't turn around to him and say, I'd rather him have come into my band, into the Sweet, rather than him be playing some shows with with some American guys. But if that's what he wanted to do, but now he's gone, I'm here, trying to carry the flag. It's a horrible thing to think, but the pandemic, it will have changed a lot of people's attitudes to a lot of different things. And I just wonder how the gig scene is going to look in the future. Now we've had this with people not going to gigs. Would you be happy right now if somebody said, yeah, we're opening it all up, you can have 10,000 in that venue, and you'll be jumped up against somebody sweating, and you'll all be jumping up and down at a gig? I'm not sure whether you would get a lot of people who would immediately go back into that. That's why, I don't know if you've noticed, that's why the majority of gigs that are starting and festivals are DJ type festivals with people on stage, not miming, but using track, especially over here. there's no light heavy rock festivals. Glastonbury got cancelled. Download, they I think they've tried to do festivals online and they failed kind of miserably. People obviously want to be there. They don't. They can click on YouTube to see somebody, perform.
Right.
Because there are lots of videos there, and it's a very, very fine line that we're going to need to tread next year, hopefully, if we're all kind of vaccinated and everybody is of the same mind and being mindful of everything, we might just get back to where we were in 2 or 3 years' time. But I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but I don't see any of the major acts, and I mean the top end, major acts, doing anything. People are starting to put a few things in for next year, but when I talk to guys who I know work for, say, Paul McCartney, he is, let's see what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
So it's you may not get your wish this year to go and see who you would want to see in the right way,
Yeah.
But we have a show, coming up, and we have a tour at the end of the year. But this is in the UK, where we are something like 70-odd% vaccinated, and especially in the age group that we attract. I'm all for somebody when they arrive at the door going, yeah, I'm vaccinated and I had a test yesterday. I'm all for that, because it's the safest. It's the only way we have to move forward. And when I hear politicians saying, no, we don't need those vaccine passports, we're all right, they're talking with their checkbook in their hand. They're not talking with the safety of the public in their hands. And I think that could be a very, very big mistake, but we'll see.
Yeah. So let's talk about Isolation Boulevard a little more. This is of course a nice play on your very famous album Desolation Boulevard. You used 3 tracks from that album of the 12. You've got just an incredible lineup of songs here: Fox on the Run, Still Got the Rock, Action, Love Is Like Oxygen, Hellraiser, The 16s, Blockbuster, Set Me Free, Teenage Rampage, Turn It Down, New York Groove, and Ballroom Blitz. Were there songs that you had to obviously narrow it down to fit on an album, but were there songs that were in strong consideration that were like the toughest ones to cut from this list?
Well, I wanted to use Set Me Free, but there was no way we were going to get Bruce into a studio in that sort of time, because there were no studios operating. It would have had to have been here. And because of the way my studio is set up at the moment, we don't record live drums. We have to go into places like Peter Gabriel's or, another studio. Mm-hmm. It was considered, but I actually found a loose live track that we'd recorded in Germany, because I've got many multi-tracks of the band, recording wise, and it was such a good drum track that we lifted it out, and it's impeccable. We just needed to edit it a little bit and shove a few guitars on the top, and hey presto, we have something really, really good there. So that was a bit of a challenge. Plus, mm-hmm. Because of the pandemic, in as much as anything, and we called it Isolation Boulevard, for me it was obvious Set Me Free had to be one of the singles. And Sweet have never released that song. I wrote it in 1973, and we've never released it as a single before. And over here, it went into the charts. It was in the Heritage charts at #1 for a while. We were getting airplay on major radio like the BBC, and it was good. It was great. We also released Still Got the Rock, which also did rather well. It set the scene for Set Me Free, basically. But the others, if you're going to re-release old tracks like that, the last time we released a a track that had been previously released was when Guardians of the Galaxy 2 came out, and both Capitol in America and Sony over in Germany re-released Fox on the Run, and it went into the Billboard chart, it went into all the charts in Europe. So, and you know something, I learned something when that was released in 2016, whenever it was, 17. The charts are not just made up from direct sales anymore. You've got streaming, you've got downloading, you've got, you know, and it's almost like going into, in the old days, you'd go into a video shop and rent a video to watch over the weekend. Streaming, for me, is a little bit like that. It's like, well, okay, you're not buying the DVD or the CD anymore. You're renting the song, and it gets a little tick over here. It's worth cents. It's not worth any real money unless you get millions of ticks on this side, you know. And but that all goes against the chart position, which, you know, is, well, I suppose you've got to get your charts from somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
We used to sell millions of vinyl, you know. It was it's a crazy world for me at the moment.
Yeah, once upon a time it was receipts from record stores and that kind of thing. But it's the world's certainly changed a lot since you guys got started. But just a tremendous list of songs here. Did you guys do anything? Did you want to approach this in a fresh way, or, you know, was there some concern on your part that, you know, longtime fans would hear them and go, "Well, that doesn't sound like the one I remember," and get a little grumpy about it? Did that even enter your mind?
It did. And the title came from me just sitting alongside the engineer, my young lad who helps out in the studio, and him saying, "I need to put a title for the project. I just don't want to put, you know, Sweet 2020." And I said, "Oh, call it Isolation Boulevard for a laugh," you know, and it stuck, you know. That and once we had that title, and I said, well, if we're going to be recording things that we do live, then we need to, we don't need any more than 12. But it took some finding to actually put 12 together, never mind any more than that. In fact, I thought we were going to end up with 10 or 11 at one point, until, as I say, I found that that drum track in one of the outtakes of a gig that was never used. So once we got the thing up and running, the tracks just automatically chose themselves, because I wanted our latest incarnation of New York Groove with a little bit of Empire State of Mind, you know, the Alicia Keys thing in there. I wanted that to go in there because that gives a solo spot to Lee Small as a vocalist as well. And also, I wanted things that maybe weren't obvious hits in America, but should have been, like Blockbuster and Hellraiser and Teenage Rampage. You know, we purposely did not want to recreate, like I did, as I said to you, 25 years ago. We did not want to recreate the hits as people would remember them, because we've already done that.
Yeah.
And the endings of the tracks, because they all had a looseness but an ending, I thought, let's leave that. You know, let's not mess with. It's like being live in a studio. You know, you don't all immediately go 3, 4 down. You know, you sometimes end with the drums carrying on a little bit and the bass carrying on, and then they stop, and then the guitarist goes da da. You know, and we had a few endings like that I thought, yeah, let's keep all that. You know.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the fans, from what I've seen on comments, it seems like they have taken to these you know, re-recordings in a way that you know, the internet can be a terrible place, and oftentimes it's a great place to go and crap on things, but it seems like people are not doing that. It seems like people are really enjoying these new mixes.
Yeah. Well, it's always amazed me because in the old days, people used to write letters to the Times if they disagreed with something in a very, should we say, erudite and very educated way, to put their point across. Now, it seems you can be this horrible, sadistic monster on the internet and go on somebody's site and abuse them, and nobody does anything about it. You know, now there's something horribly wrong there. There has to be some kind of policing. That I know that the guy who runs the Sweet Facebook site, he will not, there's a disclaimer up front, he will not have anything that is considered defamatory, derogatory, that might cause offense on there. Yes, have your opinion. If you don't like the Sweet, say so. But as the fans say, what the hell are you doing on this site if you don't like the Sweet? What the hell are you doing here?
Right.
You know, how did you find this to just say, I never liked the Sweet? Well, yeah, fair enough.
So you're picking a fight at that point. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
What keeps you going, Andy, as a recording artist and a live performer? Why do you still do this here in the year 2021?
Back in '82, when we stopped touring, and I was record producing, songwriting, appearing on other people's records, albums. You know, I was that jobbing guy who, you know, record companies would call and say, we've got a new band here. I mean, I took Iron Maiden into the studio early days, and that's probably one I should have stuck with. But you know, you still. I was going out of an evening looking at acts or looking at bands, and I came across this pub band called Paddy Goes to Holyhead, which was at the time a play on words on Frankie Goes to Hollywood, you know, and they were an Irish singer pub band doing all those good rock tracks, a couple of Thin Lizzy things, you know, and I would get on stage and jam with them. And then I realized that the drummer was the guy, Bruce, was the drummer that I'd produced in a band called Weapon, a year or two earlier. In fact, it was him who said, you should come down, you know, and the guitar player was Mal, who I produced in another band. And I met Danny, the singer. I met him at the record company that I was, the Virgin offshoot record company that I was signed to with my solo recordings. And I found myself, so where's your next gig? Oh, I'll come along, you know. And after a few months of this, they said, well, you might as well join the band if you're going to be doing most of the gigs with us, you know, and because they only had one guitar player, and, you know, I was going along. Next thing I know, we're playing things like places like the Hippodrome and the Marquee, and playing some small festivals. And the singer's come up to me and he said, you probably don't realize, he said, but we're being paid properly now. And I went, oh. He said, and here's some money for you. We've all been feeling a bit bad about this. And I said, oh, I was just doing it to keep my hand in, you know. So I then realized that I was missing being on the road. And I told you earlier, this is why I went back and started to talk to Mick. And I was phoning Steve in America saying, we got to get this back together, because I'd also met the agent who's been with Sweet since the mid-'70s. And he said, if you put the band back together, I'll fill your date sheets, you know. And I said, okay. So we set about doing it. And ever since then, ever since '85, I think we did the first gig in Australia. I haven't looked back since then. There have been moments along the way where I thought, enough's enough. It's more personal things. It's like marriage breaking up, for example. You know, my second marriage. I'm starting to think, and it was in the middle of producing Suzi Quattro's album and making a new album called Sweet Life for Sweet. So obviously some of what I'm going through comes out in the music, you know, songs like that. And I'm I'm thinking to myself, but you steel yourself because you realize that you can't go into this dark place. There has to be light. And it's when you're in the recording and you make something, you hear something fantastic, and you've mixed and made an album, and everybody's saying how good it is. That's what drives you on. And after Sweet Life, we went on the road and we toured with that album for like 2 or 3 years. I think we even came to America with it. It's that kind of thing that kind of drives you on. Plus the other thing, when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2009, and I had my treatment in early 2010, when I was free and realized that I'd been given this other chance, and I'm still here, which is because it was what's known as a T3, which was a bit of an aggressive little bugger. And so that's another thing. Do not despair. You have to be positive now. Don't get riled up. Don't have any stress. I mean, the Andy Scott of 30 years ago was probably quite a stressy guy. The Andy Scott today is a little bit laid back. He doesn't care. When I say doesn't care, he tries not to let much phase him, because there's always another day, and nobody died, and let's just see what we can do to fix it. And so the drive that was there with the original band in the 70s was one kind of drive, and the fact that we were all full on all the time. I think Steve, the bass player, was probably the least. He was always the peacemaker, if you like. But I think what drove us to make the kind of records that we made was the fact that we were that, wanting it to be the best. You'll never get perfect, but if you can get close to perfect, then that's the best that you can hope for. I mean, now with all my experience, I don't even bother to carry on with an idea of a song unless I think it's going to go somewhere. I don't have those, cassettes or tapes or recordings of Duff songs that I bring out once in a while and say, "What do you think of this?" They were a Duff song. There's no point in returning to that. If you're gonna come up with an idea, then you have to have the idea and the construct before you even start. It's not like the old days of just doodling on a guitar. The ideas for songs are also very important. Sweet have always had titles that kind of grab you, and I try and start with that these days. Still Got the Rock came from a guitar riff that I had, and I immediately fell into the chorus and was singing Still Got the Rock, and I thought I'd like another word instead of the rock. And then my other half said to me, no, what you're doing is you're personifying rock, the rock, and you've still got the rock inside as an entity. And I thought, I'll go with that. That's fantastic,
Yeah. So let me ask a question of this new, more laid back Andy Scott. Let's say a time comes, you're ready to settle down and call it a day. What happens if the other guys say, "Do you mind if we get a guitar player and carry on as Sweet? We love this music. We want to keep playing it. What do you think?"
Listen, you Americans are the franchise kings. And apparently I'm hearing stories from, friends of mine over there. They're saying, "Oh, there are bands out there now who do not have that original member in them anymore."
Yeah.
And I said, well, maybe they were always set up like a franchise, if there's and I'm not money driven. That's not the thing that drives me to carry on with with performing or anything. It's the fans will dictate. If I was to come out and say, you know, 3-5 years time, hopefully still around, please. You know, Namast. I'm. It would be the fans that would dictate stuff like that. I'm not sure whether they would accept a suite without an original member. That's just my feelings. They might accept the best suite tribute that you could get because they want to hear the music, but you're not fooling anybody then, are you?
No.
You're not trying to take something that doesn't have validity. At least if you're saying these guys played with me and they want to continue as the suite, then it would become the ultimate suite tribute. You know, it would be that kind of situation, and maybe the fans would accept that. But I'm really not sure whether they would accept anything less.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is actually not American based. It's that members of Yes have said, you know, that they wouldn't mind if the band carried on with all just continuously adding new people, you know, for years and years to come. So that's kind of where I got that idea. So
well, progressive, and I understand that, but progressive rock is a slightly different beast, isn't it?
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
Yes, have had so many different incarnations and decided to, well, I don't want to work with him again, but I'll work with these two. And you've had 3 yeses on the road at one point, and people will still go and see those incarnations. And I love the idea of that. But as I'm the only one left in Sweet, and Sweet has never had any permanent members added, permanent members. In other words, this is the new lead singer. Say, there's a story going around, and it is true, that when we were on the road in America during the last tour with Brian, I met, I reconnected with Ronnie James Dio. He was in a band called Elf, being produced by Roger Glover when I first met him. They were living in London. And then he joined Rainbow. And we were on tour together. And Ronnie used to spend more time in our dressing room than theirs. He said the atmosphere in there is not great. He said, and I said, oh. And then he put it in my head. He said, Fev, you're looking for a singer, you know? So I thought, right, Sweet with Ronnie James Dio, that would be a bit crazy. And when Brian left, we were in the studio, and I said to the others, you know, Ronnie would, and my manager, my American manager, got me his direct line, and I phoned him from the studio. I waited till midnight, make sure he was awake on the West Coast, and he said, yeah, he said I'd be up for giving it a go. So I went back into the control room and said to the others, well, he's more than willing. And in that 20 minutes that I'd been away, Steve had been talking to Mick, and he basically said, I don't want to replace Brian. He said, I think we've been doing well as a 3-piece, as we are. Why would we put another catalyst into the arena? And I thought, it has to be all of us. You can't have 2 people saying, we need a singer, and one saying, no, we don't. It has to be everybody, because it would not work. So once there was somebody saying, no, I'm not sure, I don't think that's right, the idea was kind of quashed. Now, if Ronnie had joined, or someone, if we'd have replaced Brian, he probably would have been an original member for whatever, you know, that there would have had to have been some, at that time, there would have had to have been some kind of, because I think we'd have probably gone on and had a little bit more success than we actually did had we replaced Brian, you know. That's just my personal thoughts. But because we didn't, and then Steve moved to America in '82, it kind of ground to a halt. There was a hiatus in the middle. So anything that happened after that, when Mick and I reformed in '85, the historic part of the band is from 1970 through to '82, and anything from '85 onwards is like a new start, if you like. Mm-hmm. Now, anybody who joins the band from there cannot piggyback into what happened before '82 because those hits belong to that lineup. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Sure.
So the only way we could move forward, and Mick and I then realized that to actually find guys who are going to be permanent members was going to be difficult because they don't have the stamina that we have, that Mick and I had. In other words, I'm going nowhere. You know, yeah, if I'd have found a singer back then who was going to stay with the band right the way through to today, then he would have been a permanent member. You know, you see the analogies that I'm making here.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, any incarnation of Sweet that happens after an original member dies cannot really be the Sweet. It's all very well me saying, well, I have the trademark, I'm able to pass it on. Yes, I could do that. But let's get back to the fans. They're the ones who control this. It's like I have to make the analogy with our football, soccer, as you would call it. You know, all those owners who tried to separate all the cream of the football teams in Europe and form this Super League, all to do with that. You know, the dollar, the euro, and it didn't work because the fans just rebelled and said, "You're not having our effing football clubs. We've been supporting these for 100 years or more. You know, how dare you say, right, you're not going to be in that league anymore. You're coming into the Super League. And not only that, you can't be relegated because you founded this league." That's like saying, it doesn't matter how badly we play, there's no ladder to climb anymore. You're getting the top 12 teams in Europe all going to be playing for the same competition. And that's when it falls apart for me. It can't be money driven. It has to be, if the fans still want to see a band performing Sweet songs, then it would have to be a tribute type band. You know, I do feel quite, fairly strongly about this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. Speaking of the fans, Andy, what do you hope that the fans take away from this new recording, this Isolation Boulevard?
Well, it would be nice to, and I've seen some of the comments there. I think they're just happy for us to still be capable of producing an album like that. Yes, there have been compilation albums of the original band performing some of these songs along the way, but to do a reworking and a rethinking of a couple of the, of 12 of the major songs that we've had, and to have it accepted the way that it's been accepted, I can think of nothing better. My job is done. It's what you want. You want the fans to be happy, and they seem to be happy. Especially now, the main complaint was that there weren't any hard copies around, like CDs or vinyl. It was download only when it was first released. Mm-hmm. Well, now we have an American company producing some vinyl for us in different packaging with a purple vinyl inside, and it's really fantastic to see that. And there will be some CDs soon. My son's dealing with that. He works for me, and when we go out on the road, that will be part of the merchandising. But people can still buy from the Sweet website as well. But it's that's just business. It's got nothing to do with me.
Like me, you've been around long enough to see vinyl become cassette, become CD, and now it's back around to vinyl. What do you think of the vinyl revival and what it's sort of become here in this these 2020s?
Well, I had to buy myself a new record deck. I managed to find a used Technics, one of these direct drive that I used to have that my son stole from me. But the one that I wanted to use, the linear one that I had, wasn't working anymore. The stylus was knackered and the arm wasn't working properly. So I just thought, right, time to bite the bullet and get another vinyl deck. Only because companies were sending me vinyl to okay the test pressing, and I had nothing to play it on. I used to have to go around to my friend's house, who I know has definitely got a vinyl player, but his system's not fantastic, you know.
Yeah. So how are you listening to music these days? Do you have a favorite format that you use?
I'm afraid I'm lazy. I don't go down the Spotify route though, but I do have a fairly large collection in certain folders, and also on the dreaded iTunes, because we're Mac orientated. We have a recording studio, we have laptops, we have I'm on an iPad at the moment, you know. God forgive me, you know, for going down the Apple route, but it had to happen, you know. And the one thing you have to say about it all is it doesn't have tie in beautifully, you know, that you do something on one and it appears on the other one. You know, they've got you. You know, you buy one piece and you're shackled for life. You know, and of course the iMacs in the studio, they work. You know, you can't say. We used to have crashes all the time when we had the PCs in the old analog studio that ran alongside the big tape machines.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, everything started to appear on the Apple side of things, and everybody was saying, "Look, I know that you think of them as graphics machines, but they're the future." You know, and all you then need is a stack of hard disks to keep backing everything up, and you're away. I was never really. I was a little bit like Neil Young, you know, the way he talked about digital in the beginning. When I first heard a CD, I thought, God, that's a bit tinny. You know, you're turning the bass up on your amp and things like this, and then you realise that there's not all the frequencies that should be there are there. And I remember reading this article. I don't know whether you read it. Neil Young, all those years ago in the 80s or the early 90s, saying digital sucks. You know, that's it for me. I'm only going to have a record analog from now onwards. And I thought about, well, we were still recording analog in the 90s and even in the early 2000s. You know, I've still got big tapes of the Susie album and of Sweet Life. You know, we've still got, but we were also using a program that would link in, and we also had a hard drive recorder. So we were trying all different kinds of things, and then all of a sudden, the whole thing got kind of blown apart in around 2006-07 when the Super Macs came out with, you know, Logic and all these programs, and it was at that point where I realized my studio, instead of fitting into a wing of the house, could fit in my office here. You know, all of a sudden I can record in, and it was so forgiving, and all the frequencies are back and they're there. You know, you don't have this. Well, these are the frequencies we're going to give you. You've got them all. You know, and I have to say, since then, you know, the last 10, 12 years, I've been. I bow to the great God of digital, you know, because the editing is fantastic, and the way things can be put together. To be able to send that amount of data down the line to somebody without having to post it or get in a car and give it to a courier, you know, it's just well, it's opened the world. I'm not saying it's the best thing for the world to have things as instant as that, because I don't want to start talking about these other programs that the kids seem to be getting involved with, that they do something online and then it disappears, You know, I mean, we've
Right.
all got granddaughters. You know, so there we are. You
You
know,
brought up Spotify a minute ago. The Not all of the Sweet albums are on Spotify. Is that a rights issue thing or a band decision?
I don't know. America, we don't seem to have a lot online in America. That could be the fact that somebody at when Capitol got eaten up by one of the big other release, you know, like holding companies like Universal, I think it was. There's only one album, apparently. My friends tell me that you could buy over there, and that's the Desolation Boulevard, the original one, which is a bit sad. Whereas over here in Europe and the rest of the world, with Sony, everything's available. You know, all the albums, all the tracks. You know, and we've got to be on platforms like Amazon and Apple Music and Spotify for the simple reason that without it, who's going to find you? You know.
Yeah. And those pennies, while small, they eventually add up, I would think, to something.
Yeah, yeah. What is it? If I needed to work, that's not going to keep me. Spotify.
Yeah. Well, I've had a great time talking to you, Andy. I wanted to relate a story just to let you know the reach of your music because when I was in college, Ohio State, there was this little bar that was upstairs
Oh,
from
we used to love Ohio.
there's these little
Oh
bar
God.
upstairs from there was like a bar downstairs and a bar upstairs, and they had two separate names. The bar upstairs was called Surf City, and this was in the mid '80s, and they played all music from the '60s and '70s, like early '70s, like probably nothing beyond '75. And this was, like I said, in the mid '80s, so everything was more than 10 years old. And I remember one of the big hits of the night, like every night you were there, at some point they would play Little Willie, and the place would go bananas. And this was one of the most crowded bars on the campus, and it was the bar with the most girls in it, which was why I liked it as well as the music. And it was just something to see, is all these people who, they were, first couple years in college, young people probably heard the song at some point, but it wasn't what they were listening to on a regular basis probably. And they were all singing Little Willie at the top of their lungs in this cramped little bar. And I just thought it was one of the highlights of the night. I just wanted to relay that to you just to show you the reach that your music has had.
Yeah, we were always, well, that's fantastic, but we were always slightly out of sync in America until Fox on the Run. We Little Willie was a hit in Europe in the early summer of '72, I think it was, or the summer of '72. It wasn't a hit in America till '73. By that time, we were releasing songs like Blockbuster, Hellraiser, and the Ballroom Blitz. And Bell Records, who we were signed to when Little Willie was released, wanted to release the Ballroom Blitz. But by this time, we're now in '74, and there's a deal being done with Capitol Records, because the guys from Capitol Records came out of the woodwork because our deal with Bell was coming to an end, and the guy wanted to continue and said, I want to release that. And somebody obviously put a little bit of pressure here and there, and Ballroom Blitz was actually held back until the beginning of '75. By this time, we also had Fox on the Run, and they virtually released Ballroom Blitz and then Fox on the Run within a couple of months of each other. So we had both those in the charts in 1975. But they were trying to bring everything up to date. So I understand why they did it, but that's why America missed out on Hellraiser and Ballroom Blitz and the 16s. The 16s appeared on the album, but it was a huge hit in Europe, you know?
Yeah.
So
I remember those songs. I used to record the Casey Kasem American Top 40. I used to
right.
listen to it every week, and I'd record it, and I remember having one with Fox on the Run on it, another one with When Love Is Like Oxygen was out, that was on it, and those that was my introduction to the band. I ended up buying the 45 of Little Willie in college in the mid '80s because of going to Surf
Yeah.
City.
Well, the Love Is Like Oxygen track, which came out in '78, the album Give Us a Wink, the heavy metal album, and then the next album, Off the Record, which was the we were changing. There was a lot of heavy rock moving into something a little more progressive. But the Little Willie thing, it sold almost as many as Fox on the Run, even though it didn't go as high in the charts as Fox on the Run, but it was in the charts for a long, long time. And you know what America's like, it just keeps bubbling. It just keeps there. Apparently that Elton John did an interview that I heard where he said, I used to get lots of, but he said my record, maybe it didn't go to #1, but it would be in the charts for like 6 months, and he said, that's what you've got to remember. And that year, it won the ASCAP award for the for the best song. So I was very or an ASCAP award, maybe not the ASCAP award, because that year in '78 it was up against. Was Baker Street a hit in America? Yeah, and Grease was out as a film.
Yeah.
So You're the One That I Want and all of that.
That soundtrack was huge here. That soundtrack was enormous. Yeah.
Yeah, and Staying Alive, the Bee Gees stuff. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine how pleased I was that Love Is Like Oxygen, had achieved an ASCAP award. Hang on a minute.
Oh, there it is. That is great. Oh, I will never forget Casey Kasem playing that song, and just the oddness of the name of it just drew you right in immediately. You were talking earlier about you like to title songs that way, and I used to get mad when the radio would play the short version because I liked the long version.
Yeah. And also, I think the edited short version in America was done by somebody using a penknife. It wasn't the best of edits. The edit that we did in Europe had at least had been thought about, even though there's a slight tempo change here and there, because there was no click tracks, to work to. You just had to find your spot. But at least it was a hit, and at least people loved it. I used to like the radio stations that didn't mind playing the 6.5 or 7 minute version.
Yeah, so, same here.
And the thing is, I've said this, to Brian May of Queen. I said, without Bohemian Rhapsody, Love Is Like Oxygen, the long version, may never have got played a year later.
Yeah, that's very true. Where's the best place for people to buy Isolation Boulevard, where it helps the band the most, where you get the biggest cut of the proceeds?
It doesn't matter. At this precise moment, if you go on to any of the downloading platforms, that works. There is a shop on the website, thesuite.com. And also, I think if you go on the Facebook site, there is a link somewhere that will take you to the vinyl stores and things like that. So, it's out there. But in America, I'm not so sure.
We'll find a way. So, Isolation Boulevard on you can get it digitally, vinyl, CD. I wish you the best of luck with it. And Andy Scott of the band The Suite. That's another thing too. Here we call it Suite, and in Europe they call it The Suite. I've had a great time learning about this record from you, talking to you about this and about your career, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Michael.